HSBC said today that China's EV juggernaut is unstoppable, and it will crucify sales of internal combustion vehicles made by Volkswagen, General Motors, Japanese automakers, particularly Toyota, Honda, and Nissan, and anyone else that's still around in 10 years' time from now. The EV gold rush is evolving into a cutthroat survival game. The only question here is not what's going to happen, but who's going to be left standing at the end of the decade. Existing factories, particularly those owned by legacy automakers producing internal combustion engine vehicles, those factories that currently produce millions of internal combustion cars, will be essentially worthless. Billions and billions of dollars will be lost. In fact, hundreds of billions of dollars will be lost. Much of that, unfortunately, will be money invested into those companies by mum and dads, their superannuation, their life savings. That will be lost. China is actually 10 years ahead of schedule. The Chinese government released a plan a few years ago to essentially take over their own car market and much of the global car market, but shockingly, they are 10 years ahead of where they predicted they would actually be. This year, China will sell more than 50% of all cars in their country as electric vehicles. Now, this wasn't meant to happen until 2035, but it's already here. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching the Electric Viking. It's great to have you with us. China has central planning. It's a big part of their business model. Central planning. We'll plan how to do this. We'll plan this. It's going to go that way because we plan it out, and we've got no one to oppose us. Let's be fair. It's not a democracy. But I think the Chinese government are going to be pretty pleasantly surprised. They said that electric cars would hit 50% of all vehicle sales by 2035, but that's already happened in 2024. And next year, 2025, well, we're going to see some pretty incredible numbers. First of all, EVs didn't outsell gasoline-powered cars for all of 2024. They did for about 4 or 5 months, but not for all of the year. 2025, they will almost certainly do so. Now, there's a lot of people on YouTube in the comment sections of articles all over the internet saying, the electric vehicle revolution, it's not happening. Plug-in hybrids, internal combustion. The world has spoken. That's what it wants. Guys, that's completely farcical and nonsensical. Things change every single day, every single week, every single month, and China is changing. So is the world. 30%, in fact, more than 30% growth in EV sales we saw worldwide in the year of 2024. So things are changing rapidly. And even though the media is trying to tell you that electric car sales are slowing down, they're stagnating, that's not actually true at all. The EV revolution is most certainly here. In just a few years, the world's largest car market has flipped the script on internal combustion engines with sales of EVs, plug-in hybrids, and even hybrids to a lesser extent, chipping away at the dominance of traditional gasoline-powered cars to the point where just gasoline-powered cars are now becoming a rarity in the sales charts in China. By 2025, EVs alone will outsell internal combustion vehicles for the first time, say numerous experts around the world. According to forecasts from investment heavyweights like UBS, HSBC, Morningstar, Wood Mackenzie, basically anyone who's doing some serious research into this, China's EV sales will hit 12 million in 2024, which I believe I did predict on the channel at the beginning of the year. And that will be a 20% jump from 2023. Internal combustion sales are predicted to collapse by 10%, falling below 11 million. If these numbers are correct, well, obviously that means that EV sales won't just overtake internal combustion engine car sales, they'll obliterate official goals in the country. And it's only going to accelerate. Next year, we'll probably see closer to, I predict, 60% EV sales percentage in China. Remember, EV prices are coming down. They're not going up. They're actually declining. In 2020, the Chinese government set a target for EVs to account for 50% of new car sales by 2035. Well, at this pace, China will blow past that number probably around 10 years early. Now, technically, the last 4 months maybe 5 months, I believe, no, 5 months of 2024, China went past 50%. And for some of those months, it was at around 55%. So 2025, it's a guarantee that for the whole year, more than 50% of cars will be electric. But if you look at the trend in China, it's actually more likely that it will be 60%. That means more pain. More pain for General Motors, for Volkswagen, for Nissan, for Toyota, for the biggest sellers of internal combustion engine cars in China. That's who they are, who I just mentioned. They're the biggest sellers of internal combustion engine cars, and they're going to suffer. They will have to close factories. They will have investors thinking twice about why the hell they're invested in those companies, because it doesn't make any sense. When the crossover point is reached next year, electric vehicles will continue to surge and could exceed 18 million by 2034, data published by the Financial Times says. I don't agree with this. In fact, I believe the Financial Times is completely wrong. And I believe that the numbers will be much closer to 90 to 95% worldwide by 2034. In fact, I expect that at least 95% penetration of EVs by 2034 worldwide. And I've mentioned many times why this is simply a logical mathematical conclusion if you look at the numbers. You look at the declining cost of batteries, look at the declining cost of electric cars, look at the increasing range, the increasing charging speeds, and then look at what governments are doing. Governments are realizing that internal combustion engines are poisoning people. Meanwhile, sales of internal combustion engine models will follow a continual downwards trajectory. If they do this, it's almost certain they will, but that will mean that internal combustion engine vehicles will become more expensive to produce. The less you make, the more expensive every single unit is to build. In 2034, sales will drop to as low as 2.93 million in China, according to experts. In 2025, more plug-in hybrids are expected to be sold than any year previously, reaching 4.4 million, and may grow to a peak of 6 million in 2033, as per what experts believe will happen. Now, I don't believe that's the case at all. I think plug-in hybrid sales will actually fall over the next 5 to 10 years as people realize that they're not actually the solution people think they are. And as they're unneeded, they're completely unnecessary. Now, traditional hybrid sales will basically be eliminated over the next decade. So if you own a hybrid today and you want to resell it in 10 years from now, it'll be like trying to sell an old BlackBerry phone. It'll be like trying to sell an old analog camera that takes film in it. No one's going to want it. So my suggestion is don't buy a brand new hybrid car today. If you're thinking of doing so, unless you're thinking of selling it maybe in a year's time, that wouldn't be too bad. But if you think of selling it in 5 years' time, resale value will crash for traditional hybrids, for traditional internal combustion engine vehicles, whether those are gasoline powered or diesel powered. Even classic car sales will collapse. Think about it. As there are fewer and fewer gas stations, petrol stations, inevitably there'll be very, very few of them, and eventually they'll be so rare it'll be extremely difficult to find one. So even with a classic car, that will mean the cost of fuel will be insane, and it will be so difficult simply to drive that vehicle. So classic car resale values have increased enormously over the last few years. That's going to change. While strong EV sales are predicted well into the future, stiff competition will move the market towards consolidation. Brands will have to consolidate. A lot of experts believe there will only be 10 major car brands left in the world in 10 years' time from now. A little bit like the mobile phone market. There's only a few big players in the phone market that own a huge percentage of the market. But they believe consolidation will happen even more so. And part of that is because of robo-taxis, because of automatic driving, and also because the global automotive industry will shrink at least by 50% over the next 10 to 15 years, meaning basically the entire pie will shrink enormously. More car manufacturers will be fighting over a smaller share of the market. While China's domestic EV sector is clearly flourishing, it is also facing slowing growth from a very high base, models oversupply, intense competition, and a price war, says HSBC analyst Yu Qin Ding. The longer-term direction of travel is clear. China's EV juggernaut, though, is completely unstoppable. The EV gold rush is turning into a cutthroat survival game. There has been bankruptcies in China this year. There's been bankruptcies in America this year. Fisker has gone. Canoo is about to go as well. There's numerous other manufacturers that have had to been forced to be some people would say merged, but that's not really accurate. The truth is Nissan is now is essentially owned by Honda. Honda will run the show. Nissan had no choice. They had no choice to do this, and I've talked about this on the channel. I warned people for years now that this would happen. People said I was a shill, but obviously the numbers didn't add up for Nissan, and it'll be even worse for Nissan, Honda, and Mitsubishi. All these Japanese automakers, things will get worse as China sells more and more cars, and the cost of those cars in China continues to drop, and the quality of those vehicles and the range and the charging speed continues to increase. It's inevitable. You can see exactly what's going to happen. China's dramatic shift to EVs also means the existing factories producing millions of internal combustion vehicles will have very little domestic market to serve, very little market anywhere to serve for that matter. And that will also be the case in other countries like Europe. Internal combustion engine factories will be virtually worthless. And think about it. Look what Tesla paid for their factory when they purchased that factory from Toyota. It was peanuts on the dollar. Look what Hyundai sold their factory in China for. They built it for billions of dollars, and they sold it for only a couple of years later. It was basically a brand new factory. They sold it for 20% of what it cost them to manufacture. Factories will be almost worthless. It'll just be the land value that they'll be selling for, essentially. Foreign brands will be annihilated in this what's really going to be a global catastrophe for places like Japan and Germany who rely on their automotive market. In 2024, the market share of foreign cars plunged to only 37% in China, compared to 64% in 2020. So sales in China for internal combustion, but also for foreign brands, as in Japan, America, and Europe, have fallen by 50% since 2024. BYD's plan is to completely eliminate them from China. And as you can imagine, I'm sure that there are other Chinese manufacturers with the same plans as well. Maybe that's not their plan, but their plan is to take market share, and they most certainly will. The Chinese don't believe anymore that legacy automakers make better cars than they do, because they're right, they don't. This demonstrates Chinese buyers' increasing preference for local vehicles, says CarScoops, in the planet's largest new car market, which results in German, Japanese, and US manufacturers seeing a significant source of revenue completely eliminated. The Volkswagen Group traditionally has made 50% of their profits worldwide from China. 50%. What happens to the most indebted company in the world, the Volkswagen Group, when that 50% of profits disappears? Which inevitably it will. And if it doesn't all disappear, almost all of it will. At least 95%. So as you can see, enormous disruption will happen. Investors in legacy automotive companies will be, demolished. But you know what? There's a sucker born every day. Look at all the people who invested in Fisco. I beg them not to. All the people who sold their houses to invest in Lucid, to invest in Nikola. There's a lot of people who lost billions investing in those companies. And there will be people continuing to do this. I mean, look at Nissan and Honda. Their stock prices basically were cratering. And all of a sudden, they're joining together and their stock prices suddenly went back up again. Doesn't make sense. But neither do humans very often. Guys, I'll try to keep you updated on what's going to be happening over the next few years. Nissan are not the only one. There'll be many other legacy automakers in big trouble, and they'll be trying to hide it from you. Remember, they don't publish this information. They try to sugarcoat it. They try to make things sound nice. They try to make it sound like everything's going to be fine. Or they say things like the Chinese are being racist. Seriously, Japanese car makers have been saying that. They make up all kinds of excuses. Oh, next year's going to be better. We've got a new plan, a new strategy. We've got solid-state batteries to bail us out. All of that stuff is intended to confuse investors into thinking it's all going to be okay. But then what happens in the end is investors get left with the bill.